President Frank Fung will be the presiding officer tonight. He is joined by Vice President Rick Swig, Commissioner Ann Lazarus, Commissioner Daryl Honda, and Commissioner Rachel Tanner. We will now move on to item number 4. This is appeal number 19-012, Urbano Ezquero versus San Francisco Public Works, Bureau of Street Use and Mapping. Subject property is 698 Page Street, appealing the issuance on February 21st, 2019 to Verizon Wireless of a personal wireless service facility site permit. Construction of a personal wireless service facility in a zoning protected location. This is permit number 17WR-0319, and we will hear from the appellant first. You have 7 minutes, sir.
Overhead, please. Overhead, thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Urbano Ezquero, and I'm opposing the installation of the 5G antenna located at the corner of Page and Steiner Street. As I mentioned in my brief, based on a few reasons. One of them is the aesthetics. As you can see on the board, this will be basically the pole completely. And as you can see, all these apparatus that will be right in front of the kitchen's windows. So it will be obstructing the view in there. One of the other reasons will be the possibility of loss of value in the property due to the fact that this apparatus is emitting radiation constantly. And the third issue will be the health issue. Regarding the health issue, Verizon argument is that this antenna is safe. And they have provided no evidence because it's basically impossible to provide that. They don't really have the evidence that is safe. And furthermore, my belief is that there is more reasons to believe that it's unsafe. Every single organization agrees these antennas emit radiation, even FCC, OSHA, and any other multiple companies. The question in here will be what is safe and what is not safe for ours. So that will take me to a story or an amendment that happens like in Hayward Assembly member Bill Kirk, he introduced legislation that will allow to the companies to get the permits much, much easier and will be make it harder for the cities to fight the installation of any antenna or towers. And one of his comments was, you wouldn't have to go through the Planning Commission, through the City Council, Quilker explained. But the International Association of Firefighters disagree, and it begins to oppose the cell towers on the fire stations after firefighters complain of health problems. These firefighters developed symptoms, said Dr. Gunnar Hauser, who conducted the pilot study on firefighters at the station with cell towers. The symptoms included problems with memory, problems with intermittent confusion, problems with weakness, Hauser said. Hauser says that their brain scans suggested even low level of radiation frequency that cause cell damage, and he worries about more the vulnerable group of like kids. We found a normal brain function in all the firefighters we examined. So, following the lobbying by firefighters, Assemblyman Kirk and his co-author exempt the fire stations from their bill. So this is the first piece of legislation that anyone is aware of where somebody got an exemption because they were concerned about their health. This is also our case. As you can see in here, the building in itself is 12 feet away, the antenna. And if you look at the building in itself is a 3-unit building, and it has a deck. And there will be, this antenna will be shortened. So basically where the red line is, so therefore will be straight forward to any individual who is at the deck. Furthermore, below there are a family, 3-bedroom units, but there are basically families living on it. This will be emitting radiation 24/7, and I don't think it does really, at this close distance, is really, in my view, unacceptable. If you look at all the studies that have been happening, there's 2 main reasons. One is how close you are to the antennas and how long you are exposed to it. And in this particular case, you're going to be exposed like 10 hours, 12 hours a day, 24 every single day. And the distance, as you can see, is 12 feet away, basically. If this was a public space, the minimum distance should be like 30 feet away. And if you're in a park, you're going to be in a park, what, once a week, twice a week, 1 hour, 2 hours? And that's your expose. And we're here 12 feet away, 10 hours a day. So I think that's really, really extreme. Another case is that the proof that these are not really safe, there was an ongoing case in the school at Ripon, California. And as the cell phone towers in a local schoolyard is to blame for the cancer diagnosis for 4 students in the last 3 years. The tower in which is located is Weston Elementary School. And the last, basically, I think it was last month, you can see here, Sprint finally agrees to remove the cell tower from the California school property. So there are really issues that people taking matters in their own hands and forced to take these towers off. So there are also many other studies that can just point out to dangerous and technology. And I am going to overwhelm you with this work with many of them. Verizon can provide many studies, and we can provide as many as well. But none is conclusive. The truth is that we need more data, and especially with the 5G. It's a new technology nobody knows. So what I will ask this board is just at least the minimum, very minimum, just to put it on hold and just think about what the consequences are for this. Put a moratorium. If there's nothing happening, put it up, no problem. But at this point, we do not have any sufficient data that these are not safe. So, and as everybody can agree, just being exposed to any level of radiation, it can be good for your health. And this particular unit, as I said, is going to be there 10 to 12 hours a day. If you are not home, you could be even 24 hours a day. So again, I just ask this board to at least reconsider, to revoke the permit, put a moratorium until everything gets sorted out. Because at this point, again, they don't know, we don't know what the truth is about this 5G. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Are you finished, sir?
I think I did, yeah.
Okay, because you still have 28 seconds.
Well, we'll see what they say.
Okay, so I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
First question, were you aware that this board is not allowed to make a decision based on the health consequences due to Article 25? So our decision cannot be based on a lot of what you've represented?
I've been reading a little bit, and they say that it's not. But as you can see, the firefighters got an exception.
Well, that's my second question.
Why we can't?
So the second question is, I enjoyed your brief, and one of the questions was that the bill that gentleman was trying to pass, our governor vetoed.
Yeah.
But where did you get your information that it was altered because of the firefighters, and why?
This is online. I just got it online. I don't have the means to start to hire a specialist. I am a regular person. I live in there. Unfortunately, at the hearing, I was out of the country at the first meeting, and somebody's supposed to come for me, and they didn't do it. So here we are today.
Okay, thank you.
And, but also, these are the studies that you can do by the fire. Here you are. I don't know.
Again, I agree, sir, but unfortunately, due to Article 25, those are not really what we can take a look at. But that's why I was just asking, where did you get your information? Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. We will now hear from the attorney for the permit holder.
Good evening, President Fung, members of the board, Paul Albritton, outside counsel for Verizon Wireless. Thank you for your attention to our project tonight. I'll begin with just a little bit of background. We have a representative of CBR Group here who worked on the plans and background if you have any questions about that. We also brought Raj Mathur of Hammett & Edison, who conducted the RF emissions studies, in case you have questions about that. We're not unsympathetic to the health concerns of the public. As you probably know, I've been doing this for 30 years, and we continue to have this same concern. And Verizon Wireless remains vigilant to remain in compliance with FCC guidelines, which are reviewed on a regular basis. This particular facility complies fully with the FCC guidelines and is below the FCC guidelines. The appellant referred to it as a tower, and these facilities are far less, have far less wattage, far less powerful than the towers that we used to have, for example, on Sutro Tower. And that's the whole idea of these small cells. I asked Raj Mathur to actually come to calculate the exposure at the kitchen windows, because that was a concern of the appellant. And if I can ask him to come up and speak with you just for a moment, that'll conclude our remarks. I might have surprised him, but here it comes.
Good evening. My name is Raj Mathur. I'm with Hammett and Edison. We're an independent consulting engineering firm located in Sonoma, and I'm a licensed professional, excuse me, licensed professional electrical engineer in the state of California. Our job as engineers is to evaluate sites like these for radio frequency exposure or RF exposure compliance with the FCC standard. We've completed that evaluation for this site. We find that it will comply with the FCC limits. The maximum calculated RF exposure level at the top floor, where the kitchen is 3.5% of the FCC limit. That means that the levels are about 25 times below the limit. The maximum level anywhere on the building is on the roof deck, as you're standing right on the edge of the roof deck, 12 feet away from the antenna. The maximum level there is also below the FCC limit, and the maximum RF exposure level at ground is well below the FCC limit at 1.8%. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'll just conclude by, I know you have one new member, but as you stated earlier, once we are compliance with the FCC guidelines, then the federal law doesn't allow for a denial based on the RF emissions or health effects. So we'll have answer any questions, and otherwise we'll sit down.
I have a question,
Yes.
Counselor. So your brief was very well done, too. I like the fact that you don't give us a boilerplate brief and you responded to the appellant's questions. So one question I had in regards to the firefighters,
Thank you.
In your brief, it says, this falsest claim, Government Code Section 65964.1 mandates that a wireless application that has not been approved or disapproved by the city or county within a reasonable amount of time is deemed approved. However, due to unique duties and infrastructure requirements for a swift and effective deployment of firefighters, wireless facilities proposed for placement on fire department facilities cannot be deemed approved. Simply put, wireless facilities cannot be located on or near fire stations, but to accommodate fire departments' unique ingress and egress needs, a proposed wireless facility cannot be deemed approved. So I don't really get that. So are they allowed at a fire station, or are they not allowed at a fire station?
Thank you for asking that question. I had it in my notes and I didn't follow up. AB 649, which was referenced in the appellant's materials, was not signed by the governor.
Yep.
But the law that we are citing, AB 57, was signed by the governor and contained the same language as was proposed for SB 649. I worked on AB 57. The purpose of AB 57, or Government Code 65964.1, is to make the FCC shot clock deadlines mandatory or executory, so that if a local jurisdiction exceeds the FCC shot clock guidelines, which is 90 days for a co-location or 150 days for a new construction, the application is deemed approved. And we can send a letter and say it's deemed approved. At the time, the firefighters were concerned that if an application were deemed approved without any government oversight or any review of the application, that there would be the potential that a facility would be placed in a manner that it might obstruct the egress and ingress of the firemen as they exited the building. They conferred with the author. We conferred with the firefighters and were willing to create that exception. So if you go through the process and get a permit, you can put a facility on a firehouse. The only thing that bill excludes is we can't bypass that process and put a facility in front of a firehouse without it going through some kind of review. And that's explicitly, as it states in the legislation, was to make sure that the first responders could ingress and egress the building as a result. that's the reason that was accepted by the author and by the legislature, and there are many.
Well, that's what I imagined. Then when I was reading this, it says that it's allowed and it's not allowed, which pretty much says what the appellant was saying, that there was preferential treatment because of their profession. I mean, I would imagine that an ambulance leaving a hospital or a law enforcement officer leaving a police station would require the same amount of ingress and egress as far as time and safety.
That's a great question. I know that firefighters in particular are timed on their responses, and it affects the insurance rates for fire. The Firemen's Union is one that is active and outgoing and requested this change at the time. I'm sure if you've been involved in legislation, you know that it's frequently something of sausage, and that was the effect in this particular circumstance.
I mean, it just seemed to me that it was preferential. But the next question I have, which I believe we've gone over before, but I can't remember. You mentioned earlier that the antenna is directed towards the tree.
I said the equipment is directed towards the tree. This particular facility...
Is that a tri-angled antenna?
Yeah, the antenna on top is facing in three directions, and that's because this particular facility, unlike the streetlight facilities where we're usually lower and shooting up and down the street, this is a taller facility. It's a 4-foot antenna, and it provides service to an area of approximately 1,500 feet radius. Our light standard facilities only provide service to approximately 500-foot radius.
Would you enlighten me or give us a brief tutorial? So, Article 25, when it comes to health stuff, harkens back to a 1996 study, correct?
I love tutorials. I'll try and be brief. But the research, the basic research, and Raj is better at this. Maybe I should call him up.
He could step up.
Help.
The basic research goes way back to the 40s. The research that the preliminary, the initial FCC standard is based on is from the 80s. The Congress and required the FCC to adopt a standard. They looked to the NRCP, the NRCP, and the AIEEE.
Raj, you better come up.
Yeah,
He's
AIEEE, and Raj is actually on the AIEEE committee that reviews this standard, and they've actually reviewed it this year. So the standard is reviewed on a regular basis. The Congress and the FCC, realizing that its primary goal was not health, turned to the EPA, the OSHA, FT, the Federal Trade.
Why don't we let Raj try to explain this? Thank you, Counselor.
To help determine the health effects, and that standard was approved in 1998, and the standard, Raj can further explain.
So just to clarify some of the acronyms and timelines, the FCC standard combines two existing standards at the time, which is 1996. It combines the NCRP, National Council of Radiation Protection Standard, and the IEEE, Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers Standard, and that's the 1996 FCC standard. Since that time, the IEEE standard has been updated many, many times. The most recent update is coming in a couple of months. And as Paul said, I'm part of the subcommittee that sets that IEEE standard, and that standard is essentially unchanged from that time, from 1996. We're continuously looking at new literature, but all of that points to the fact that the standard is well established. The standard is effectively the same in across all the developed countries, and there's no reason to really change that.
And that standard is a standard which says fundamentally that the amount of radiation that comes out of this equipment is not harmful to health of human beings within a certain radius, correct?
Correct. In fact, there's a large safety factor in the standard. So where the science shows that there may be an effect to humans, the standard is set 50 times below that level. There is a massive safety factor built into the standard.
Right. What is counterintuitive to me, because I don't know anything, is, especially when it comes to this type of technology, is in 1996, was there 3G?
Yeah, and I see where you're going with the question.
And we've gone from 3G to 4G to 5G, and what's counterintuitive to me is that the standard, we're now talking about 5G installations, and where when I came on this commission 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, I don't know, time flies when you're having a good time, the installations were just emerging into 4G, I believe. And so now we're at 5G, but we're still relying on the same standards. And what my intuition is that when you get to 5G versus 3G, you're dealing with a lot more power, but the standard seems to have stayed the same. Why is this counterintuitive to me?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The standard is independent of technology. Standard is based on frequencies. So the frequency which is emitted by TV stations, radio stations, cell phones, that frequency is what governs what the FCC limit is, and it actually changes depending on the frequency. But it's independent of the technology or what's called the modulation of how you modulate or code that frequency to transmit. So there's various ways of doing that. And 5G is just a new way of coding or modulating the signal. But it's the same frequency that's already part of the FCC standard, if that makes sense. And I can clarify.
So the amount of radiation, the amount of radiation, we see each other regularly, not necessarily yourself, but Counselor, we're old friends. That might be stretching it from his point of view. And we hear from the public that they're scared to death of getting killed from radiation. I mean, that's what the appellant's saying today. Yet the cell towers serve more and more powerful these, and so why make me feel comfortable here. And why, as we're getting more comfortable with these, more powerful with these, and we're getting up to 5G, and God knows there'll be a 6G and a 10G and a 20G, why should I be comfortable that the amount of radiation coming from these cell towers is not more and is not being more perilous to the health of consumers and the various appellants who stand in front of us?
Yeah, actually the power is getting lower. So these small cells and nodes that you see are, in this case, if we take this as an example, it's about 10 to 15 times lower power than a traditional Verizon macro sites with multiple antennas on buildings and tall towers. And the same is true for your cell phone, actually. The older cell phones, you said 2G, 3G, they were actually more powerful in terms of the antennas and the power has been scaled back dramatically on the phones. Now, they're capable of going up to the high level the old phones were, and Paul kind of touched on that. When you're further away from a cell site, the phone can do that. But what's happened with these newer phones is that when you're closer to the sites, they don't have to try as hard to communicate. And so they are much, much better now at operating at a lower power level if you are closer to a site without having to transmit at the higher power level. So on the whole, actually, the power levels and the RF exposure levels have consequently come down.
So the radiation, so you're testifying to the point that these towers that you're putting in now to serve 5G have less radiation coming out of them than ever before?
Well, this one is 4G. It's not a 5G. But this is about 10 to 15 times lower power than a traditional Verizon macro.
And therefore lower radiation?
Yeah, potentially at ground, it's lower. Now, if you're on an adjacent building and you're, standing on the deck, maybe it's higher. So it's also situational as to how close you can get to it. But certainly at ground and at nearby buildings, it's lower RF exposure level than you would get from a macro site.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll just add, from my historic perspective, my first phone was a briefcase with a handle on it, and it was about 5 or 6 watts. It had an antenna on it. My second phone was a Motorola brick. It was about 2 to 3 watts. These are a watt or less, and they ramp up 1,000 times to talk to a further cell tower. If you're next
Counselor,
to
do you use Verizon?
Pardon me?
Do you use Verizon?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you.
evening. Radiation, can't see it, can't touch it, can't even feel it. That's its very nature, the ability to invisibly go right through walls and windows unimpeded and penetrate our very cells, changing, mutating, and permanently damaging our DNA forever. Under the California SB 649 exemption for firefighters, no one involved was allowed to acknowledge the terms of agreement, even though it was well documented that EMR radiation emanating from such antenna wreaked havoc with the health and well-being of the firefighters in question. A myriad of serious short-term health problems resulted: skin rashes, memory loss, fatigue, mood swings, headaches, and confusion that led to basic inabilities to perform their required tasks. All firefighters reported profound memory loss, and their brain scans resulted in abnormal scans. Now, I have detailed documentation on that right here, pages of it, by doctors. These antennae so affected the very strongest and healthiest among us that it prevented them from carrying out their life-saving responsibilities. And yet, it is perfectly legal to place them in close proximity to pregnant women, infants, the infirm, and the elderly. This is criminal conduct in any civilized nation, criminal conduct that was paid for and condoned on the state and federal level. And by placing these antennae atop city-owned property, it will position companies like Verizon to argue that when people do develop health complications due to long-term EMR exposure, it will be the fiscal responsibility of the city of San Francisco, not their company, to deal with. The tobacco companies repeatedly reassured us that their product was, in fact, safe and non-addictive, and public alarm both unnecessary and alarmist. Trust us, they said. We would not put your health at risk. Our studies don't lie. Our researchers don't lie. And we, the company executives, would certainly never lie. Studies and reality proved otherwise. The pharmaceutical companies told us that opiates such as OxyContin and oxycodone were safe as prescribed and also non-addictive. Once again, profit and propaganda triumphed over truth and science. Verizon says it will take EMR readings and that, naturally, they will be well within safety limits. Their readings, however, will in no way whatsoever reflect the real dosage of what we will absorb 24/7 from right across our street into our bedrooms, our kitchens, our living rooms, day after day, week after week, year after year, as we eat, rest, and go about our lives at home. Radiation will continuously penetrate our skin, organs, skull, and brain tissue while we sleep.
Sir,
and let's not forget that
sir,
radiation damage is cumulative,
sir,
permanent, and cumulative. Trust us,
sir,
they say, just like the firefighters did.
Your time is up. Thank you.
Would you like my documentation?
You can accept it for the record.
I hope somebody will bother to look at it and read it. It's rather important.
Is there any other public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to rebuttal. We'll hear from from the appellant, Mr. Esquero. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Well, I don't know, what can I say? I mean, as you can see, just the close distance to this particular building, to the street, is just, it says by itself. And again, we don't know, they don't know. So let's give it some time. Let's figure out what's going to happen with this. Because we can be able to go to the roof. And again, if it was a public area, it won't be even installed. I am also a citizen. I can, why not protect me or my family or anybody else in there? It's just way too close. And Verizon's councils appoint the FCC. The FCC, as you even heard, they call it like the rules like the Clinton era. They're not completely updated. Why you don't really take the readings from Norway, Sweden? I think, if I am correct, United States and Japan have the higher levels allowed. And even in his, I think it's Exhibit C, again, we will be subject to almost a 91% of the maximum allowed in this country. And that will be 24/7 for us. So I don't know where else how to put it. It's just, I don't want to insult anybody, but it's like a no-brainer. At this distance, with these things, it shouldn't be. Again, I am not against the not to put an antenna, but just let's be safe. If it's safe, fine. Prove it to us. They can't. And if you, or the state, try to save the firefighters, why not everybody else? Put it a higher, I don't know, go higher. Give us some buff zone. So I don't know what else to tell you. So, and he mentioned another thing which I really particularly didn't like it, that he says that simply that you, the board, are not even basically the right. Okay, while the appellant has submitted additional studies properly link the cell phone usage and antennas to detrimental health effects, this board is not the proper agency to opine on how they weigh and how to weight and analyze those studies, rather than FCC. Well, perhaps you cannot analyze that, but I think you can have the power to just stop this, because in many cases the boards have ruled that safety of citizens was foremost priority and concluded that it should be altered or canceled if there is still an unanswered question and not enough information, which this is one of the cases. Again, I strongly urge you to revoke this permit or put a moratorium or come up with some other stuff, but this is unacceptable in my view. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear from Mr. Albritton.
You've been very generous with your time. I'll just repeat that we will do post-installation testing. If the appellant emails the Department of Public Works, we'll test inside his apartment following installation. And again, thank you for your time this evening.
Counselor? Yes. Can you refresh my memory? At one time, the metric 15 feet was brought up. Was that a design standard for?
The facility, the pole is 12 feet away from the building.
So, Commissioners, this matter is submitted.
Commissioners?
Okay, I'll start. So, after hearing hundreds of cases, I am definitely moved and, to be honest, somewhat upset. I personally feel that we're on the wrong side of this. But the rules that govern this body indicate that the information that was before us, that this permit was properly issued. At the same time, as someone from the member brought up regarding tobacco and alcohol at tobacco companies saying these things, one of my fellow commissioners reminded me that during his term, there was smoking allowed in this building. In fact, the commissioners here regularly had cigarettes before them. We've now realized how many years later how wrong that is. This city doesn't allow for us to buy plastic bottles. We buy glass bottles now. So unfortunately, from where we are now, I would have to deny the appeal on the basis that was properly issued.
Public hearing is closed, sir. No. Anybody else?
We have a motion then?
My motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Honda to deny the appeal and uphold the permit on the basis that it was properly issued. On that motion, President Fung?
Aye.
Commissioner Lazarus?
Aye.
Commissioner Tanner?
Aye.
Vice President Swig?
Aye.
Okay, so that motion carries and the appeal is denied.